Coming up next on Headline Humboldt, after dozens were arrested and the Cal Poly Humboldt campus reclaimed from student protesters opposed to the war in Gaza, we speak with Sheriff William Honsal about the choices made. Also, Professor James Woglom, president of the University Senate, says an existing disconnect between university brass and the students has grown dangerously wide due to these recent protests. Coming up now on Headline Humboldt. From the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. I'm James Falk. Thanks for joining us. On Monday, I spent time on the then besieged campus of Cal Poly Humboldt, speaking with student protesters and observing what I could of the so-called occupation. These conversations were in-depth, rational, and pointed. They want the university and the broader state university system to divest of its support for Israel and ditch its affiliation with companies known to support the state of Israel. The students were protesting a horrific situation in Gaza that has left thousands dead, many of them children and young families, and many more survivors struggling to eke out an existence between falling bombs and sniping soldiers. The students are angry that what they see as complicity on the part of the U.S. government in perpetuating this war, and they are angry with the university and the CSU system for continuing financial relationships with firms believed to be partnered with the Israelis or otherwise profiting in some way off of the bloodshed. It's not a simple issue, and these are not simple people. In my sojourn on the university campus, I was politely and almost immediately approached by a student who asked only that I be sensitive about photographs, as those still on campus were gearing up for potential arrest. The young man then declared that contrary to portrayals in the media and elsewhere, the public was absolutely welcome on campus and encouraged to engage with the protesters in conversation and debate, something I witnessed. He complained that the university had decided from the onset to treat the protesters with a lack of care and respect and took punitive steps which ultimately led to violence and chaos. He said students across the board are feeling commodified and ignored, especially as the university has begun its conversion to a polytechnic, with the administration pushing growth and enrollment even as housing and other infrastructural elements were proven insufficient to the existing population. But the main issue for the protesters was absolutely the war in Gaza, the death and destruction now being rained down on innocent civilians as well as on Hamas. It's been a battle, he said, to get their story out to avoid petty mischaracterizations in the media and force a deep and meaningful conversation about war, profit, and the incalculable value of a human life. Quote, any piece of misinformation the school puts out is amplified and any truth we put out is suppressed, he said, referring to university press releases and community messages that alternate between saccharine sweetness and what they perceive as arrogance. It's entirely possible, he said, to oppose the nation of Israel and call out its crimes and policies without being anti-Semitic. Quote, those narratives of outside agitators or racism, in this case anti-Semitism, are classic tactics to redirect the conversation, he said, adding that most media outlets have taken the bait. The arrests of some 24 students occurred early Tuesday morning, all of it live streamed through various sources who were on site. Humboldt County Sheriff William Honsal explained his department's role and how he came to be involved, adding that he believes violence was kept to a minimum through the large deployment of officers and a high level of planning.
We got called to the scene of protesters that took over Siemens Hall at Cal Poly Humboldt. We went there to assist, and obviously quickly things escalated to the situation where violence was used and law enforcement was surrounded, and so essentially a call for law enforcement to retreat that area due to the danger was initiated by Cal Poly Humboldt. And then after that, Cal Poly Humboldt then started assessing the situation to determine what the best course of action was going to be. Last Wednesday, which was, I guess, the 24th, I was contacted by President Jackson asking for the sheriff's office to offer some assistance with planning and helping them with this issue that was occurring on campus of the criminal activity and the extremism that took over the campus and was restricting the movement and became safety issues for the students and faculty to where they had to close campus. At that point in time, we started working with university police and university management to try to determine the best course of action. Obviously, the university is in charge of this incident, their incident command. And what they did was, all we did was offer technical assistance. All of the plan that was needed required a lot of personnel to be utilized. In Humboldt County, I'm the mutual aid coordinator for law enforcement purposes, and more mutual aid was needed than our county law enforcement could provide. So then I had to reach out to our region. Region 2 goes from the Oregon border on the coast all the way down to the Bay Area. Alameda County is in charge of our region, Alameda County Sheriff's Office. I reached out to Alameda County once I received an official request and what was needed from Cal Poly Humboldt. That request was finally received on Saturday. And what we did was we worked with that request with our partners there in Region 2 and even over in Region 4, which is Sacramento. And we received information there, or we provided information of what our needs were. And several departments responded to those needs and came to the county. So as the situation unfolded on Monday night, early Tuesday morning, we were able to provide enough personnel and implement Cal Poly's incident action plan, which was to utilize three teams to go into campus to secure the quad and to essentially go through the buildings methodically and to clear those out and render them safe, and to make sure that people that didn't want to leave were safely arrested and booked into county jail. I'm thankful that we had so much support because very little force was used, and minimally. Mostly it was just passive resistance. And our officers and deputies that were assigned to this quickly took people into custody without any, really any resistance. One person resisted arrest slightly, and that was dealt with swiftly. And everyone was processed and taken to jail. And a total of 25 persons were arrested and booked into jail that night. And so it was, I think, a successful operation. We were able to search through all the buildings, secure all the buildings, turn the campus back over to Cal Poly facilities, and they were able to clean up, power wash, and to discard of the debris and all of the issues that were there, and hopefully try to restore campus so things can open up and things can kind of return back to normal, and so students can hopefully finish out their semester and even graduate.
So a quick follow-up question. I get a lot of emails and comments from folks who watch the various live streams and whatnot. And there were claims made that on the video, it looked like at times the police were too violent. But you said there was hardly any violence. I mean, what are your thoughts about that kind of situation and the level of violence used? And do you guys review the footage later on to kind of go through what happened to define any mistakes that might have been made, or how does that look?
Right. So James, people throw out the word like violence all the time, that we were violently approached the crowd. We violently reacted, this show of violence. And so we got to be careful with words. Words have meanings, correct? And so when they say violence, I don't have anyone that's pointed out any violent actions that our officers or deputies took that night. They may use those words, but what's the evidence that supports that language? I don't see it. What I see is a show of force. And because we had a massive show of force there, then if anyone was planning on being violent towards law enforcement, which was there to do our jobs, that didn't happen. We actually had people that equipped themselves with essentially riot shields and riot helmets and goggles, anticipating that there was going to be a fight. And so several of the people that held up there anticipated a fight. When they saw the amount of law enforcement officers we had there, they decided not to fight. To me, that's a win. That means we didn't have to respond to their violent actions. And again, this is, yeah.
Just real quick, I mean, like the number of officers there, a lot of people point to that, but can you explain from your perspective why a lot of officers is better than too few?
Absolutely. So let's just take this into consideration, okay? That if someone was wanting to get into a fight or a confrontation, and and then they wanted to pick a fight with me, but I brought 12 of my friends with me. Are they less likely to pick a fight with me at that point in time? Probably not, because they know the odds are stacked against them. And that's exactly what happened that night. That people, we had a lot of intel, and including a lot of students that defected from this protest, because there was an element that had infiltrated this protest and that wanted to have some kind of confrontation with law enforcement. And the information we were receiving is that they were preparing for a fight. And so if you're preparing for a fight, we're going to prepare so we can take advantage of whatever that is. And that means having the numbers there. Because we had so many people there, it was de-escalating, right? And that is impressive. When we have we have several hundred law enforcement officers on scene for this kind of incident, and we didn't have any really reportable uses of force. We didn't have to launch tear gas. We didn't use pepper ball. We didn't use stun grenades. We didn't use all these things that we could often see in a protest. Weren't used because the people were compliant. People submitted to arrest. There was no fighting law enforcement. And that is a win. And so our community should be very happy with how we approach this. Our community should be very thankful that we have law enforcement agencies throughout the state that cared enough to send people here to help keep our community safe. And there was people that wanted to get arrested and for this thing, and they were arrested and they were treated with dignity. Our officers were respectful. They were processed, booked into county jail, and most of them bailed out. And so that's, to me, again, people may criticize the tactics that we use, but when we look back and say, we didn't have one injury on an officer, we didn't have one injury reported to us by any of the protesters that were arrested, to me, that's a win. And we took back Humboldt State, or Cal Poly Humboldt, and it's hard for me to remember sometimes. Yeah, so we took back Cal Poly Humboldt, and we were able to provide the students, the other students now, most of the students, 6,000 students, the opportunity to attend school and to utilize the last part of their semester, and again, hopefully graduate.
Two important questions. Could it have been handled initially differently? Because that, the dramatic scenes that everyone saw that went viral of the officers and the protesters in that scrum in the foyer of the building or whatever, could there have been another way to approach that where that didn't occur? Were you guys caught off guard, or what happened that led to that?
Yeah, James, I can't really speak to that moment because I wasn't in charge of that incident. That's Cal Poly Humboldt, and it's their call with how that was managed and how the initial deployment. There will be an after action on this, and I'm sure that University Police and the university will look at this situation and critically, because we're going to learn from every type of activity that we do, right? Whether it was good or bad, if there was things that we can improve upon, we're always looking at these and try to improve on it. If there's things that we could improve on, I hope that we would take necessary steps to implement those the next time. That would be definitely the goal. But yeah, we're definitely going to help Cal Poly Humboldt look at this and offer suggestions, and then I pray that it doesn't happen again. But if it does, maybe we'll be better prepared.
Yeah. And then there were a couple of media people who were sort of gathered up in the crowd control at Cal Poly Humboldt. Can you explain what you know about that, and were they targeted?
Media was not targeted. That is definitely not something that we actually do. Media is allowed to be in these areas to document, but media also has to understand that they can't get wrapped up so closely within the protesters that they become a part of being arrested, right? And so you being media, and there was lots of media there, lots. Yeah. There was trying to document things, and they have to just understand that, of course, when we start taking ground, media can't get in the way. If you are sitting, if you are being with the protesters at that point in time, you can't use media as the ability of not getting protests when you are caught up inside the protest. And so you have to use your common sense. You have to use your own training to know that where's your best vantage point to capture the things without interfering with law enforcement and our law enforcement action. If you do that, then it doesn't give you immunity from violating the law. And so though there was some media that got caught up in it, once they were identified, once we understood, then they were just detained and then released. And so that's, that did happen. But we hope that, again, it's a live and learn from a lot of different people here. And so I hope that next time, that doesn't happen.
Last question. Do you have any idea what this is going to cost the county? And I mean, is that a cost that will have to be borne by county taxpayers, or is Cal Poly Humboldt going to contribute to that? How does that work?
Because this was a law enforcement mutual aid request from Cal Poly Humboldt, the overtime costs that the sheriff's office and the other city agencies that provided supports will be covered by the California Office of Emergency Services.
Okay.
So it does not affect the county. All of the support that came in out of county, the cost for travel and lodging and overtime will be covered by California Office of Emergency Services. Cal Poly Humboldt does have to pay all of their services. They do have to pay a lot of expense for having this operation, but they do not have to bear the cost of the personnel. But the state will do that.
Art Professor James Woglom, also president of the University Senate, spent the protest working to support the students on the ground, with several sleepless nights accrued in the process while trying to defuse the situation. He was emotional as he admitted that he and other members of the Cal Poly Humboldt faculty could have done more. He also said this current conflict between students and administrators exists within a broader struggle over identity. Will Cal Poly Humboldt be something entirely new in the future, or will it continue the proud, if often inconvenient, tradition of resistance in the face of perceived injustice?
In terms of performance, I'll say first, and I hope many will follow after me, that I failed. I tried my best to do what I could do with the skills, the knowledge, and the resources I had. But I was unsuccessful on many levels. I can point to very specific things that I think were not in keeping with the community that we've tried to develop and maintain here at Humboldt, specifically the engagement of law enforcement as a primary, first round tactic, and then the use of just, on that first night there was more. There was so many police surrounding the building. I know that those decisions are hard, and I empathize and sympathize with those that made them. But I also, it's I think indicative and illustrative of a basic misunderstanding of the community that we have, the activist community that our students and faculty have worked to, again, develop and maintain over many years. It, was one of many mistakes. And again, I blame no one more than myself. But I hope that others who are watching what's going on here know or learn not to engage in that manner. And I also hope that we can use this very grave and obvious mistake and misstep, poorly executed engagement, to rebuild the community once, as soon as we can.
Yeah.
And to acknowledge that this isn't who we are, and this is not how we should have engaged these students.
How much of the blame do you put at President Tom Jackson's feet? I know that the CFA put out a request for his removal. Some of the students have said the same thing. Do you feel like he's personally responsible, or was it more of a system miscalculation? Is that something you can even really talk about?
Again, this is a really complex issue that I'll admit that I've been more wrong than right about in the last couple of days. So I don't know who or what has made what calls. I can say, and I hope if Dr. Jackson, if you're watching or hearing this, I've known Tom through my engagement with the Senate and the general faculty. And what I would describe is, I guess, evidence over my time and my role of a misunderstanding of our community culture, and a lack of philosophical alignment with it. And one of the many mistakes I would say that I would attribute to myself is I did not take those as the red flags that they probably were, because in these moments of extreme need for leadership, a lack of philosophical alignment at this level is damaging. There's a need to believe in each other and understand each other and care for each other. And Tom, again, if you're listening, I don't want to disparage you as a person or undermine any thoughts or care that you applied to the situation. It just was a mismatch that was made and accepted by probably all of us, and ultimately a destructive mismatch. And I apologize for my part in that as much as anybody.
It was reported to me that you were trying to help students, and there was also some reports that faculty at times felt threatened with dismissal, and that there was a sort of a intimidating tenor to the way the university tried to get between students and the faculty. Did you find that to be the case? And if so, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, just going back to what I just spoke to, I don't think there was an understanding of the tenor that needed to be taken in those communications throughout the week. I think they were framed around the concept of criminality, and as such were leading to defensiveness. In a recent one, there was well, I won't get into. Anyway, I do think that a lack of delicacy in engagement, that again I think comes from a lack of understanding or a lack of willingness to understand each other.
Two more things real quick. I mean, one of the things that one of the protesters told me is that there's a lot of history here that is sort of going unremarked upon, that a lot of the students feel like they've been sort of commodified in the switch to the Cal Poly format, and that also with the parking situation and the homeless that were moved out and all that, they feel like the university has demonstrated a lack of care. Do you think that that had some role in all of the things that unfolded?
I don't want to create a one-for-one correlation there, but I know what they're talking about. I mean, I think there has been a desire to move away from the Humboldt, not a desire for me, but a desire that's been expressed on many levels to move away from the Humboldt that was and towards a very specific conception of a polytech. And I think that there is a lot of folks that in good faith were working to think of a new kind of polytech that had the sort of social and ecological and so forth engagement and advocacy, but also spoke to the curricular needs of a polytech. And I think there were others that were not, that were just trying to wholesale change Humboldt, through whatever way they could, to something new that was not what it was. And I mean, it's thousands of people. You can't force people to change the way they think.
Especially when a lot of them were drawn to the school under a certain identity,
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, and I'll say I've aided it and abetted it on many levels.
Probably the biggest question is, how do we move on from here?
I guess I don't know. With care, hopefully, with love. I mean, I know that's trite, but I do mean it.
Appropriate, yeah.
And yeah, I don't know how and what we're gonna do. I'll promise I'll be there every step I'm allowed to be along the way. Yeah, but through commitment, through paying attention to each other and listening to each other's needs, through not excluding each other because we don't like what other, what we stand for or what we care about, through community.
Yeah, okay. Is there anything that you'd like to get out there that hasn't been covered very well in the media in terms of your perspective or the perspective of the students? Anything you'd like to highlight?
Again, kind of a cliche, this has been a hard week. But one thing that keeps me feeling fairly comfortable is that so many people I've never even met on campus before this week gave their all. Actually, yeah, there's a very specific thing. I was trying to stay on site at the campus as much as I could through that first, I guess, 5 days. At a point, I think I had annoyed a lot of people, and I tried to pull back because I don't think I was affecting any positive change at that point. But there was one night, I'm an art faculty member, and the art department volunteer. I'm getting a little teared up saying the art department volunteered to take shifts so that I could go home and sleep, and they sat out there with the kids all night, through the night. And when I got there in the morning, they were still there. I mean, it was I can never. Sorry, I can never thank them enough. But that's just one example of people putting their all into this, and again, yeah, just gratitude to everybody who tried to make sure nobody was hurt.
University officials, when asked for comment, pointed us toward their many press releases. These canned and cultivated statements were issued repeatedly during the protesters, allowing administrators like University President Tom Jackson to effectively avoid cameras and follow-up questions. One release from several days prior patted the university on the back for its long history of protest and direct action, even while stating unequivocally that the current confrontations were not protests, but criminal activity. After having visited the campus and spoken with protesters, having read the signs and seen the fear in the many students' faces as they awaited the inevitable consequences, I can report without hesitation that most, if not all, of these students and their allies were fighting what they view as an injustice and possible genocide directed at a population in Gaza. Such a resistance has long been the sum and substance of what the university stands for. Is it still, I wonder? That's it for this evening. Stay tuned, stay informed.